Hello and welcome to AM Agenda. I'm Laura Jays, and today Tony Abbott is in Brunei for the East Asia Summit. He's held a number of bilateral meetings over the last week with his counterparts overseas, and the latest is with the Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, and he's declared Japan our best friend in Asia. But here back home, the Labor leadership contest is heating up with the caucus due to cast their vote at 4 p.m. this afternoon. Later in the program, we'll be speaking to Bill Shorten, one of the Labor leadership contenders. But joining me here first from Perth is the Finance Minister Mathias Cormann. Minister, thanks so much for joining us so early. First, I want to ask you about the US federal government shutdown. The fiscal cliff is looming within days. Can you just talk about the ramifications for Australia?
Look, we don't believe that it would substantially impact on the Australian economy. I mean, ultimately, we are confident that through the United States internal processes, this issue will be resolved one way or the other.
I also wanted to ask you about Tony Abbott's comments overnight to the Japanese Prime Minister. He's declared Japan our best friend in Asia, but he's also said that the time has come for Japan to be a normal country operating under the same rules as other countries operate. What does he mean by that?
Well, look, I mean, I haven't caught up with the comments that the Prime Minister has made overnight. It's 5:30 in the morning here in Perth. I mean, I'm sure that even as required, the Prime Minister will continue to expand on those comments.
Okay. I also wanted to ask you about the WA Premier Colin Barnett, who is in Beijing at the moment. Now, he has made some comments when it comes to FIRB, the Foreign Investment Review Board. He says at the moment the rules discriminate against China and are holding back investment in Australia. He says it needs to be corrected. Do you agree?
Look, I mean, Australia does not discriminate between countries. The Foreign Investment Review Board does not discriminate between countries, and indeed the government doesn't discriminate between countries when it comes to foreign investment. I mean, by way of principles, foreign investment is, of course, has always been and will continue to be very important for economic development and for our economic growth moving forward. There are, of course, depending on the size of the foreign investment, there are rules to assess and to make sure that there are that the particular investment is not contrary to the national interest. Those rules apply in the same way across all countries. We are not proposing to make any changes to the national interest test. Of course, you know, if there is a foreign investment proposed from a state-owned enterprise, essentially all such investment proposals have to be assessed through the Foreign Investment Review Board process. But again, I mean, that is not a situation that is unique to China. That is a situation that applies right across the board for you know, well-established reasons.
But when you look at the rules, Colin Barnett has pointed out for the United States and New Zealand, there's a $1 billion threshold for investment in Australia. But for China, because most of the companies in China are state-owned, well, the threshold kicks in at $248 million. Now, he said that China feels discriminated against. Do you think that's a fair comment, or is that just come out of the blue?
Well, it is not a fair observation because, of course, the rules are not designed for or against any particular country. I mean, essentially, in relation to state-owned enterprises, quite appropriately, given that there are some questions that need to be assessed around the commercial nature of any particular investment and any particular business operation, for example, in the context of government ownership, then it is quite appropriate that there is a different level of assessment than there would be for a you know, private company that is operating in a completely free market as a private company. But I mean, again, I mean, there can be no suggestion that there is any discrimination whatsoever between countries. But of course, depending, I mean, if you do have a situation where state-owned enterprises, government-owned enterprises are pursuing investment opportunities, then you have a different level of scrutiny and assessment, quite appropriately, to ensure that a particular investment is not contrary to our national interest. Then if it is just
will this be a sticking point in trying to get a free trade agreement sealed with China within 12 months, which is the time frame Tony Abbott has put down? Will this be one of the major sticking points in that negotiation, do you think?
Well, we are totally committed to achieve a free trade agreement with China, and of course, we will be continuing to have those conversations, in the appropriate way. And I'm not going to be conducting those negotiations here with you this morning on Sky
Australia
News AM
is
agenda.
going to have to make some serious concessions here to keep that 12-month timeline.
Well, let's wait and see. I mean, obviously, we are totally committed to achieve the free trade agreement within the 12-month timeline. We will be working very hard to ensure that that can happen. But of course, let's just see what concessions are required, if any.
Okay, yesterday we saw the IMF forecast below trend growth for Australia in 2014, but still an increase going from 2.3 to 2.8% between the years 2013 and 2014. Unemployment rate also to hit 6%. But that's, looking at the numbers, it's slightly better than what Treasury had forecast, and it's almost in line with the PFO numbers. So isn't this a bit of good news coming out of the IMF report?
Well, I mean, you're quite right. The numbers are broadly consistent with what is in the pre-election economic and fiscal outlook. So from that point of view, it doesn't come as a surprise to us. However, I mean, if you look at the trend in recent years, it has been a trend that has been deteriorating. Now, the IMF numbers are on the basis of calendar years. The Treasury numbers are on the basis of financial years. So there's some slight swings and roundabouts as a result of that. But, I mean, there is no doubt that the global economy and the economy here in Australia are facing a series of risks moving forward, which is, of course, why it is so important that the Parliament supports our agenda for stronger growth and more jobs. That's why it's so important that the Parliament supports our agenda to scrap the carbon tax.
Joe Hockey said yesterday in a statement the coalition would have to quote, appropriately manage the financial fiscal outlook. Does that mean more cuts or more stimulus ahead?
Well, I mean, we've been very explicit in the lead up to the election. We believe that the economy needs our agenda for a stronger economy and more jobs. The economy right now needs us to implement our plans to scrap the carbon tax, to scrap the mining tax, to cut to cut all of the unnecessary, costly red tape that Labor has imposed on our economy, so we can unlock $1 billion worth of savings per annum for business. The economy needs us to restore the Australian Building and Construction Commission. The economy needs us to execute and implement our plan for productivity enhancing infrastructure. So, I mean, we are very conscious of the fact that our economy is not in as strong a position as it could be and as it should be, which is, of course, why we've made all of the various promises we made in the lead up to the election.
Yeah, just on the carbon tax, there was modelling published in the Fin Review today that suggests that if the carbon tax is repealed before 2015, the federal government might be up for billions of dollars, up to $2 billion worth of compensation payments to business. Do you accept that, and is that modelling correct?
We don't accept that. I mean, our position in relation to the carbon tax has been transparent for a very long time. Our intention is to scrap the carbon tax with effect from 1 July 2014. And I mean, let me just note here again, this is, of course, a carbon tax that we were never meant to have, because, of course, in the lead up to the 2010 election, every single member of the former government, every single member of the Labor Party campaigned on a promise that there would be no carbon tax under a government led by Julia Gillard. We are now essentially just making sure that we go back to what was promised in the lead up to the previous election and what we've now promised for 2 elections in a row.
And Mathias, finally, just on Holden, they've rejected, it seems overnight, a plan to boost exports, an export deal. If they don't reconsider, will the federal government pull subsidies?
Look, I mean, we'll continue to have conversations with Holden and other stakeholders in the car industry, and of course, Ian Macfarlane, as the industry minister, is doing exactly that. Now, I mean, from our point of view, by not proceeding with Labor's disastrous fringe benefits tax changes hitting the car industry, by scrapping the carbon tax, by reducing red tape, we are already significantly boosting the competitiveness of the Australian car industry. I mean, the importance, of course, is moving forward, that if we are looking at ongoing support, at least through a further transitional period, there's got to be a plan to ensure that the car industry can be on a sustainable, viable footing over the medium to long term, and of course strengthening their capacity to export cars produced, manufactured here in Australia is an important part of that.
Mathias Cormann, Finance Minister, joining us from Perth this morning, where it is very early. We do appreciate it. We'll speak to you soon.